Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'll call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There is one agenda adjustment. There will be no votes taken under number 5 on the agenda. Because this meeting is remote, all of our votes will be done by roll call, and this meeting is being recorded. Public comments. Are there any comments from the public tonight? Seeing none, we'll go right to the schedule overview and turn it over to Kevin at this point.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to share my screen. The host disabled participant screen sharing. I don't know if there's a way to undo that,
Yep,
but
do not take that personally, Kevin. I'm on it.
1 second, Kevin. I'll
Thanks
see
a
if I can
lot,
do that for you.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay, let's try that again. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. Appreciate everyone making the time. The goal is to really just, as we've discussed at the last school building committee meeting, give a high level overview of the design progress. What have we been doing for the past couple months? What are we doing right now? And what can we expect in terms of progress and decisions over the coming months? So that's really what tonight is for. It's also, hopefully an opportunity for you all to ask some questions at some point. Feel free to interrupt at any point. I'm sure I'll be stopping at various milestones to ask if there are questions, but feel free to interrupt at any point. So this is really just kind of 10,000 feet. What is the design process been thus far? And again, what do we have left? So as you all know, we really couldn't start the DD, the design development process, until the vote passed in January and until we had executed contracts for the consultants, which may have happened in February or March. I'd have to double check on that one. So as you can see, we started design development going from left to right. Late winter, early spring, as noted by the red arrow right under the 2025. Today's June 11th, so that just kind of lets you know where we are. So we're still pretty early in the design process, in terms of big picture. We're going to be continuing to finalize the design development over the next couple weeks, and eventually submit to MSBA, which you're all aware, and then move into construction documents. Just so you can all understand, the timing of that. We're going to be working on the construction documents part. The 60% we won't be submitting to MSBA until maybe December. The 90% construction documents until next spring. And we're hoping to put this out to bid late spring. That being said, and then start construction in the early summer, late spring of 2026. As we've also discussed, we're going to be possibly progressing certain parts of the documents, the drawings, quicker than others, to consider doing some early packages, which I think a number of us as consultants have done successfully on the construction phasing side. So, a question that's been asked is, well, as an example, what does 60% construction documents mean? Does that mean every single trade or every single specialty within the documents is at 60%? The short answer is no. Certain parts are farther along than others. I think a specific example would be, we've considered or we've discussed doing an early site package, some site and infrastructure. So those drawings are more advanced than, on the other side of the spectrum would be some of the finish work, furniture, casework, and equipment. So hopefully that's just some general context. What I'd also like to do before I really jump into the next part of the slide is to show you all kind of the folders that were emailed out. I sent out a link, I think last week, that we got from the DRA team. It's the DD estimate set. It's what, we're sending to the cost estimators, and I'm not going to go through it, but you all have access to this at your own time, your own leisure. I would encourage you, if you'd like, check out some of them, all of them, take a look, but there's really a lot of information in there. And, you know, there's drawings and specifications, and that's really, on a weekly or monthly basis, when you wonder, like, what are these consultants actually doing? I think this, it's not just, us as your OPM and DRA as the architect in Suffolk. There's sub-consultants, over, 10 of them, I believe, that are working behind the scenes to put together this big package that will continue the design process and eventually be submitted to MSBA. So before I move in, I think just want to see if there's any opening questions.
Hey, Kevin, it's Joe. Just a quick question.
Yeah.
You talk about you've got this kind of master timeline and schedule.
Yes.
I haven't drilled down into your files there, but I assume you have timelines, right, for each one of the initiatives or modules within. So you guys.
This is just a real high level one, but when I think yesterday or maybe last night, I emailed out the monthly report that we do just as part of the MSBA's process. It's the budget, it's the monthly schedule. That's a real detailed schedule done on Microsoft Project. There's probably, it's a 3-page document with 500 lines, and it has a lot more detail. If I'd take a look at that, and I'm happy to meet with you anytime just to kind of talk through it.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is, and again, this is what you guys do for a living, but if you start falling behind on a sub-module or a sub-project, I assume you add a lot of attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's at some point during tonight, if we want to talk critical path, we can, but we're constantly, there's your schedule and then there's what happens, right, in real life. So I think there's ways to stay on schedule, even if certain things come, certain challenges arise. You can find opportunities in the schedule, so long as it doesn't impact your critical path. And that's why, we're meeting with DRA and Suffolk multiple times a week with you all, but also on our own to really take a hard look at that, right? It's a good question, though. Thank you. Any other questions before I jump into a little more of the meat of this? Okay. All right. So we've also, discussed, I think at the last school building committee meeting, there was some interest related to local approvals, state approvals, and just really making sure we're keeping the town informed and making sure that we're getting their buy-in so that, later in the design process, there aren't any delays that result from either the town or the state. So as we stand here today, there's going to be, we're targeting, July for the Hanover departmental review. We went in front of them last year. Carl, I'm not sure if it was you and Judd but a couple of us went in front of, I think it's a lot of towns are doing this where they bring in, a number of different departments and they can ask you all the questions they want. And, we went last July and I think it was a couple hours, and fire department was there. Police had representation. I'm not sure who else was there, but there was a number of people, town manager at some point, and it's really an efficient way to make sure that they know everything that we know about the project and ask questions so that we're ready to go through their permitting process. So these are some of the dates we're targeting. The last item is another abutters meeting. We did have one last summer. It was pretty well attended by the neighborhood, especially behind the school, and we plan on having another one later this summer. So any questions about these dates?
No specific date on July for any of these meetings?
We are coordinating with the town. Carl, I don't know if you have anything to add there, but
yeah, not as yet, Bob, but certainly
Okay.
we'll publicize those. It takes a couple of weeks to set them up, so we should have enough advance notice to notify you all as well if you'd like to attend, and you're certainly
Yeah.
welcome.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Same with the abutters meeting. If, you know, I guess I'll ask the group to give it some thought. It doesn't make more sense to do it in August or September. It could also depend on where we are with the design. You know, we may know a little bit more with the site in September than we do August, and we'll do it then. But we're obviously open to any feedback for that date, especially because some of you may actually be abutters, right? So,
Yes, I am.
okay. Fair enough. Okay.
And thank you for your support.
I'm here for you.
Exactly. So again, want to move through this as efficiently as possible. What, you know, all the DD estimate set that I just showed you all, you know, the folders, drawings and specs, you know, they're all divided into different trades and subcategories. And, you know, I'm just kind of going through them on a high level. So during the design development process, you know, the MEP, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection has all, I would say it's all been advanced. And Carl or Lynn from Left Field's on, both know more about this than I do. I would say most of the really big decisions related to this were made before schematic design, you know, in terms of what type of heating system and so forth. And then as we progress through DD, we're not coming to you for decisions at this point. We're really just working within the code, local officials if needed, and really the commissioning consultant and other engineers to make sure that you know, that part of the design is progressing forward. But I'll certainly let Carl or Lynn jump in at any point if you want to add some color.
I think the drawing's a good graphic to have. I know you can't read it at all, but one of the things that happens at this point is that the scale of drawings and the scale of investigation for all the major trades is a good reflection of what design development means. Previously in schematics, we'd work at a scale like at 1/16 of an inch equals a foot. And so you could fit the whole building on one sheet of paper. Now we're working at 1/4 inch equals a foot, and in some cases 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. And so that in itself shows you to fit the whole building on a sheet of paper, it takes like 4 pieces now to do that, 4 large sheets. And I know we don't often print these out, but that's a good kind of example of what's happening at this stage in all the trades: architecture, structure, mechanical, electrical. Wall sections, for instance, when we show the components of the building, it's schematic. We drew them at 1/8 inch. They were cut through the building and you could barely see things, but we could label them and so forth. Now we're drawing them about, you know, 5 or 6 times that size, where you can see every stud, you can see the sheathing, you can see the exterior material and so forth at 1.5 inches equals a foot. So it's much larger scale details. And that's reflected in the cost estimating that goes on now. Previously, the cost estimators, you know, they not to put them down, but they tend to price what they can see. And so when the drawings are fairly limited in amount of detail, they have to add some allowances for things they can't see. Now we're filling in those gaps. The more information that gets put down, you know, I keep saying paper, but in reality, you know, these are computer files, but the more information that's available, the more precise their cost estimating and the smaller the allowances can be, the so-called contingencies. So that's generally what's happening during design development.
I
Thanks,
think
Carl.
this,
That's very helpful. Go ahead, Lynn.
I think this phase of the project too is all about coordination of all the various components of the building, making sure that they all work together, vetting through all of the design as it is developed, to make sure that once we get through design development, we're ready to go into construction documents and complete the design to the point that it's ready for bidding.
Yes, a lot of the things we are doing is exactly that, coordination. So, you know, we might be widening a wall to fit in the structural bracing. We may be adding a duct shaft because now the mechanical engineer knows exactly where that duct needs to penetrate a floor to get to the next floor, to get up to the roof. And so we're adding things like duct shafts and wall thicknesses becoming more real, that kind of information.
Thank you both. All right, so the next, I guess, subcategory we broke out was security and technology. And, in terms of building layout, where the entrances and exits are, a lot of those decisions have been made. We have already met with Hanover Police and Fire at one point. We will continue to meet with them. But we don't have any, critical decisions for you all to make right now related to the design development submission. Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this is continuing the design and making sure all the key stakeholders, especially staff, and I guess local security and police are kept in the loop because they're going to have feedback. Something that came up last week, I think Bob Mello pointed out that Hanover is implementing or already has some two-way radio communications. So something as subtle as that, we want to make sure that as this design advances, that we can be on the same page as the town and the first responders for their technology. So again, no decisions today, tonight, or next week, but there may be some subtle ones as we move forward. Especially as with staff, and sometimes these may be value management decisions, not to make the building less safe, but really, not on schools, but I've worked on a public safety building that one example that this is during the really tough post-COVID inflation escalation, and they had like a high-rated ballistic glass on the second and third floor, and they had some serious budget issues, so they decided to really just keep that high-rated ballistic rated glass on the first floor. Those are I guess, maybe bad example for a school, but those are some of the decisions that may be made if we have to make tough budget decisions. But
no, that's an appropriate example, Kevin. Actually,
Yeah.
as you say, the high level decisions have been made about the basic security systems and protocols and so forth. But one of the things that happens not just in this discipline, but in some other areas at this phase, is when we get the initial feedback from cost estimators, there may be some issues that we need to tighten up on or make some tougher decisions on in order to keep the project right on budget. And one of those is actually, for instance, hardening the building at the ground floor. Hardening is the security word for it, right? Where, certainly at the front entrance, we will insist on, ballistic rated glass there. It's not technically bulletproof, but it has a high security against smashing or even shooting its way through. It slows down people ultimately to the point it may take half an hour to break through. It's very strong reinforced glass. That same glass can be used around the entire first floor if we're really worried about people breaking in at various points, not just at entry points. That obviously has budget considerations to it. So we might want to think about the extent of that, using it. And this is something generally we'd recommend being in executive session for, as opposed to a public meeting where you might not want the levels of security to be known out there by chance. And similarly, the number of cameras in a project. We certainly have a base recommendation for how the building should be monitored with security cameras, but sometimes people like to see a few more here and there, and again, it can be a budget decision as to how many additional ones, how much of the site should have cameras, and so forth. So there's a little bit of flexibility in some of those, but certainly we maintain a baseline of security in the design always.
Thanks, Carl. Very helpful. All right, so the next, well, if any questions before I jump onto interior finishes? Okay. Interior finishes, is something that we've looked at. We've had a couple working group meetings to look at different materials and different areas and colors, and patterns and so forth. But realistically, a lot of those decisions are going to be made later. And some of them may be the best example of value management decisions that we make as a group. Once we have a better feeling for how costs are looking and really, what the group is comfortable with. But this is really just to show you some of the items you've already seen, and remind you there aren't any decisions you have to make right now, but they will come at a later date. Carl, Lynn, anything to add on this one?
I think it's important to say that during the design development, you're working and having programming meetings and trying to further the development of all of these things. But you are using a baseline for all your estimating, so you have a basis to start from, and from that, if there's value management needed, then you proceed in that path. But you do have a baseline, because at the end of design development, you want a very good idea of the cost of the building.
Yeah, very good point.
And,
Thanks.
and just to be clear, the photograph on the left is not your proposed school. It's another building. But the photograph or the rendering on the right is our rendering of the main stair in the entrance lobby there. And we'll be producing more of these throughout the building with this level of detail, so that we can walk through the whole building and review it with the appropriate people, including yourselves, when the time comes to sort of finalize some of these decisions. And occasionally, as Kevin said, finishes are something that we can look at alternates fairly late in the game, in terms of, well, do we want this kind of railing or a different kind of railing on the stairs? There might be one that's a different cost and might achieve the same safety, but it's slightly different feel. Or the floor material is one reason we show the photograph on the left. The rendering is showing terrazzo. The one on the left is a different floor material it's a very hard finish and durable and easily maintained as well, but it's individual tiles. Those kinds of activities are going on during this phase as well. But the cost estimates will be very detailed and enumerate all of these materials that are in the base building assumption right now. So there is a sort of higher level of information, again, compared to the schematic phase.
Thank you both. This is just, something we've already looked at, different types of materials that we'll be looking at later. Interior layout, these are all images you've seen before at previous SBC meetings. I think it's worth noting, based on some concern at the last SBC meeting about who was making decisions, which spaces or shops were moving, that since the last SBC meeting, we've had some, I would describe, really productive and positive meetings with staff. And, I'll let Carl correct me in a moment, but there was some conversations about moving the graphics department to the third floor. It was going to create some efficiencies. After all the conversations with, I think, all the key stakeholders and just some really good feedback and conversation, it's been determined, I believe, that that's not going to happen. So, Carl, I'll let you add a little bit more about that process, but I think that's just kind of what happens at this stage.
Yeah, we had hit upon what we I think generally thought is an improvement to the design, which included eliminating that bump on the second floor there to simplify the structure, and at the same time enhance the front elevation of the building to reinforce our design concept and the notion of the three parts of the program. And that gave us some more room on the third floor, so we could relocate the space here on the second floor. It didn't mean we literally had to take the program that was in that space and move it to the third floor, but that actually was the first recommendation, because it seemed like an appropriate kind of space. It has a high volume. It's kind of airy and spacious. It's like the space that graphics occupies today in the existing school. So, and it's the right size. But again, after some discussion about their place in the building, their contact with public occasionally, there was a desire to be a bit more centrally located. And so fortunately, there's enough flexibility in the design that the Allied Health shop was about the same size, located on the current second floor, that we could swap those two programs and sort of reach an appropriate kind of resolution to that. And so we think it's a win-win for everyone. The design is better, the economics of the structure is better, and the program occupants are, I think, satisfied now.
Good, good.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate that. So the exterior design is probably something, you've all seen the most in the past couple months, SBC meetings, working groups, and otherwise. And so this, I would just say, generally speaking, the exterior design concepts are something that we have been looking for some consensus on. Not that everything you're looking at is final and nothing will ever change, but more so that the material we've discussed, that we're just in a general agreement that this is clearly not a red brick building, and that we're proceeding with different materials as we advance the design and have it have the cost estimates done. That's the level that I think we're looking for consensus on at this stage. Of course, there'll be further discussions on some of the finer details, but really just want to make sure a year and a half from now, when the shovel's in the ground, or that folks aren't surprised or angry, and that you understand that this was a process. So, Carl, feel free to chime in, but I feel like we have spent a lot of time on this.
The way this ties into this stage of the process too is, as we say, estimators like to measure everything, cost estimators, and so they'll take our model of the exterior of the building. They'll measure every square foot of glass we have, every square foot of solid wall, and we've identified all those materials. There's a lot of precast concrete there, as we said. Every square foot of metal roof, and so forth. And so those will factor into their cost estimates on a very direct basis. They know the marketplace. They know cost per square foot for those materials. If there's backup walls and so forth, or labor premiums for certain designs, they know how to factor those in. At the same time, we are taking this same model and plugging it in with our energy consultant to understand the energy efficiency of the building. Windows aren't quite as efficient as solid walls with insulation in them, even triple glazed windows, which we have a lot of in this project. It's going to be a very efficient building, but we may still find out that if we made, some of those windows 6 inches smaller across the board, it may save us some money. Glass is a little more expensive than solid wall, and it may, improve our energy efficiency as well in that regard. At some point, though, we have to balance getting appropriate amounts of natural light into the classrooms. That's always our challenges as school architects. Is we could come up with very efficient buildings if we didn't care about how much natural light there needed to be in classrooms, and everyone enjoys it, not just for the aesthetics, but it actually it helps learning. It makes it a pleasant place to be. People want to be there, want to learn there, want to teach there, and so forth. So we are, always going to be tweaking things a bit as we move forward. But as Kevin says, the big decisions about, certainly the volumes, the general building configuration and shape and so forth have generally been agreed upon here.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate that. Any questions related to, I guess the exterior at this stage?
Kevin,
Yep.
this is a question maybe for Carl, but you guys are far enough along now that you know how much money you have to spend, and so you've done an estimate to see how much money it's going to take to build a building. And so at what point, I think, Carl, you were touching on this, at what point you have to just say, we can make smaller tweaks now, but as an example, we can't change the material on the outside of it, right?
Just to fine tune that, Joe, we're currently doing an estimate. The most recent estimate we have is from the schematic phase, when we went through with a previous set of information, previous set of models and drawings and so forth. So now it's ongoing, literally as we speak, that this higher level of information is being processed by two cost estimators independently. So we have a good check and balance kind of thing going on there. And moving forward into the construction documents, we really, at that point, it becomes a matter of just monitoring the budget. We don't want to make changes just for the sake of making changes. We believe we have a building that meets the budget, that meets the program, and we just want to add the appropriate amount of information so it can go out to bid to contractors, all the specifications, all the details they need to bid the job. So we are really trying to nail down the major design issues, how big windows are, and so forth at this stage when we get the feedback of cost estimates and the energy model.
So small tweaks will happen probably right to the end. But in terms of the big things, when do you kind of say, here's the date? After this, Mr. Hickey can't change, you know.
Well, we never like to say that to the boss, that he can't change, but we like to try and be as flexible as possible. You know, if there are extenuating circumstances, sometimes it does call for some dramatic changes. But we'd say obviously the major decisions that have been made on virtually all aspects of the program, and now we're into more of the detailed kind of aspects of each discipline in the building.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Again, the question because I haven't participated in all the meetings.
Sure.
You want to make sure that you're flexible enough, and it sounds like you are, but not so flexible that it affects the timing of the building and the cost of the building to stay on. I mean,
yeah, a good example actually, Joe, is we're going to check back again in the future with instructors one more time, and invariably someone will ask for more space and say, well, you know, I really need this to be bigger. And we say, well, the program is nailed down, the budget is set. I'm sorry, well, let's try and be as creative as we can here to deal with the space you have, because we cannot make the building bigger at this point. So that makes it easy for us to respond to them in a way. We don't have to be, you know, we're still the bad guys, I guess, in a way, but we have a good response to say, no, at this point, we can try and deal with it in other ways. Maybe we can be effective in choosing more flexible furniture or equipment and make your space work. We, you know, have good interior designers who help us with laying out those kinds of things. Maybe it'll work better than you imagine it in the space we have.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say one of the benefits that I believe going construction manager at risk, CM at risk, is that we have the person who's responsible for building this thing as part of the design process, well over a year ahead of when real major construction is going to start. So we have to have they have another set of eyes on the design drawings, from a constructability standpoint, and they have to come up with some solutions and ideas too. So, it really is, I think, beneficial that by the time major construction starts, we've had a long time together to work through a lot of the hard stuff.
Yep. Okay. Thank you both.
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
Good questions. Yeah.
Kevin, can I just, Bob, if you don't mind?
None at all.
Yeah, thank you. Just to pick up on Joe's point a little bit, the cost estimator work that is happening right now, could you just walk us through when their work wraps up and numbers get reconciled, where does the SBC get updated on that? And those numbers, we've got a project budget, can't get any bigger, grant is fixed. Cost estimators are doing their next round of estimating on a lot more information. Where does SBC fit into this in terms of the updating prior to the end of the design development phase?
I can start, Kevin.
Yeah, you can start. Go ahead, Carl.
Invariably, we're having two independent estimators produce these numbers. Their numbers will be a little different. So we have a whole day session generally to first reconcile those numbers to make sure they're both seeing the same things in terms of the quantity of this or that. They may have different opinions as to the cost of something, but we at least want to make sure we've got the quantities right. How much metal roof is on this job? That number shouldn't vary very much from one estimator to the other. For instance, one may think of it as a different price in their database or whatever. So there's that step first of reconciling, so that we have two, good numbers to work with. And in our experience, invariably, things might come in a little bit higher than we expected from the previous construction cost estimates, and some first of all, some corrections might have to be made. Wait a minute, you counted the whole first floor as terrazzo? No, it's only this much. And if our information was a little bit off, we'll correct that. That'll bring the number down. But also, we will produce a list, the estimators will, the designers will, the engineers will produce a list of suggestions as to how we might accomplish the same function with a less expensive option, so that we could tweak the budget to get it back, on track. Different people call it different things. The value management is a current term of art, trying to imply that we're managing the budget, but trying to preserve the value in the building. That flooring is a good example, that terrazzo. There is an alternative material. It's less costly, first cost, and it does the same thing functionally. It may be, slightly different in long-term life cycle cost. That's one of the things that we would offer at this point in time. We can sometimes lower the first cost, but it may cost you more in the long run. If I'm sure you've run into this in other things that you buy, and so forth. So typically that's first done by the project team. We'll develop that list with the cost estimators, and like anything, there's probably a third of the list that we can all agree on. We don't even have to share it with you. We know we want to take those items to lower the budget. Then there might be, another portion of the list that we need to develop in a little more detail so that we can share it with you, maybe first in a working group, because there's a fair amount of detail that we have to go through to explain what the option is, what the change involves, and get a recommendation and a buy-in from the working group. And then there might be, a third or a quarter of the items that maybe are significant enough that in order to accept them, we'd want to share it with the full building committee. And so there could be a meeting where we bring that list and say, here's where we are. We need to get, $100,000 out of the job. Here's a list of items that out to 150,000. Which ones should we take? And we build consensus, and we get back to the budget. So the building committee does have some input, but I don't want to make it seem overwhelming, because we do a lot of the work behind the scenes in advance to shave it as close as we can reasonably, without taking any major decisions that should be, done by the full building committee.
I guess I'll just pipe in with a comment, and that is that I guess I've jumped to all of these assumptions myself, that I feel like I'm just talking to hear myself talk in this regard, but I am not feeling that this is a place for me to pipe in about my opinions about security measures and what we should take. And I'm assuming that there'll be a work group for me to say, all right, here are the 7 items that you can use for interior colors, and here are the products. And we'll, behind the scenes talk about whether or not we want gray or green, and how much tan and how much of the Dove gray are we going to use. That would be behind the scenes, based on what we can afford. Show me the options that I can afford, and let me noodle around with those a little bit later. The same is true for exterior design. I like your exterior design a lot. I've been comfortable with what you've presented in terms of features and options to give texture in places, and the concept of a warmth. And I guess for me, it's, putting that all together a little bit later in a work group to really put my hands on and see some of those things as samples, so I can get a sense that, yes, this very large building that's going to be mostly concrete with little bits and pieces here that look like wood, that it's really a warm, welcoming place for our school community. I have faith that it will be that, but feel like those conversations are going to happen in another forum.
Yes, Sandy, most likely the kinds of things you're talking about would be in a working group, where and as we get into materials, particularly interior materials, we will meet in person, and we'll bring you things that you can put your hands on and feel and see the actual colors, and not presented over a computer screen. And that's the time we really look at those. That's why they have the label. It's a work session, a working group. We like to make those decisions with you at the table. Generally, we have recommendations, we have thoughts, and certainly we often produce options and give you the pros and cons, but we want you and collectively the people interested to be involved in these kinds of decisions as we move forward.
So forgive me if I said this earlier. Don't take my lack of questions as disinterest. I'm ready when the time is right.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay.
So as we just kind of move forward, this is the end of it. So we've moved through this pretty efficiently. I would just say before we get into site issues and permitting that out of all the
Hello?
projects that, hello,
Yeah, hey, listen, I've been trying to button in there for a couple of minutes here, but
Oh.
no, my only concern, Carl, is extras and getting everything down to a science, getting everything completed now, because
Yeah.
moves, adds and changes can slow up production, could slow up the timelines. And if one gets slowed up, then it will slow somebody else up down the chain. So
Yeah,
that's
we
why.
appreciate that, Bob. Yeah, that's why we spend so much time in the construction document phase. That's where we are trying to, as we say, nail everything down for the bidders. Because even though it's construction management and they'll make good decisions about putting a budget together with allowances and so forth, ultimately there are still tradesmen out there and subcontractors who are bidding, significant parts of this job on a lump sum basis, and they only price what's in the information, in the plans and specs. And so we do spend a great deal of time and have independent folks checking it and so forth to make those as complete as possible to minimize change orders.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. Sorry I was late
Thanks.
attending.
No, good question.
thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. All right. So before we get into the site issues and just general permitting, my experience and all the schools I've ever worked on is and maybe any construction project, the hardest part of every project is getting out of the ground. It seems to, like, no matter how much testing you do, there are always surprises because it's underground. And so I would say, as it relates to design development, most of the action on site so far, outside of the building that maybe folks have seen is related to site testing, additional test pits, borings, perk tests. And so, in the past, and just a reminder for the group, we really couldn't we couldn't start this up again until after the vote passed and until folks were under contract. So just a reminder of that, but in the past couple of months, the civil team's been doing a lot of additional testing. And I'd say there's been some information or challenges that have come up over the past couple of weeks, and we're going to be presenting updates to you. Either the 18th and 25th, but certainly more information. I'm going to turn it over to Carl in a second to maybe talk through it a little bit, but just want to kind of put that on everyone's radar. Is that this is something we'll be making decisions on over the next couple of weeks and months, with your feedback, and as more information comes in, we'll make the best decisions as a team. But we don't want anyone to feel rushed, blindsided. We want everyone to have as much information as possible to make the best decisions. So, big picture, what that means for our initial design development, submission to MSBA was scheduled for June 26th or 27th, a little more than 2 weeks from now, after the approval on the 25th, exactly 2 weeks from now. Depending on how, what information we gather in the next week or so, we may push that submission to the MSBA, which is not a big deal. It happens all the time. I was on the other end of those calls quite frequently. The difference between the earlier stages of MSBA leading up to schematic design is that those submission dates are aligned with board meetings. MSBA has board meetings every other month, 6 a year. Once you get past that stage, you're really just doing it kind of on your own schedule, to stay on your own schedule. So we're not in jeopardy of missing a board meeting. It's really just us taking a couple extra weeks to make sure we all feel comfortable about the information that we've uncovered. And we do believe that this should not impact our overall schedule. So that said, I'm just going to turn it over to Carl to maybe touch on it a little bit more.
Has there been any red flags as far as the test borings that you have done?
That's a great segue to Carl.
That's a great segue, Bob. That's exactly what we wanted to share with you today, was that there have been a couple rounds of test pits done with a backhoe on site. Of course, where we could do them, in other words, we've got an existing building that's occupying part of the site. We've got paved parking lots that we didn't want to disturb if we could avoid them. We tried to keep it to the grass areas, you know, of the current school plan. In particular, we're doing test pits. This is sort of a second round of testing. We did do some preliminary testing in the feasibility phase, but we're doing more detailed testing now, specifically for stormwater management and for the sewage disposal leaching fields as well. And what we found is a little bit of a surprise that groundwater is higher than we anticipated in the area where we had proposed the leaching fields. The good news is the soils that we have encountered are actually, in at least limited areas, are more permeable than our engineers had counted on originally. So that allows us to reduce the size of those leaching fields. But unfortunately, the higher groundwater means we have to elevate those leaching fields a bit. And for those who are really paying attention early on, you might remember that we were locating those sewage soil absorption fields for the leaching under the end zones of or just beyond the end zones of the football field, inside the curve of the track on either end, right up front near Webster Street. That's where they were proposed, because that's where the best soils were. And, you know, currently that's where the existing leaching fields are for the school. And we couldn't reuse the existing fields. They were done under different vintage, you know, but we were in close proximity to them. So because of the higher groundwater, it looks like we need to raise those fields some. And of course, being under the track and football field, if we weren't to move things around, we'd have to raise the entire track and football field. We can't have a berm, you know, right in the middle of a track or something, obviously. And so we're looking at that right now, trying to, one, fine tune the size of those fields, get them as close to Webster Street as we can, and possibly shift the orientation or the alignment of the track and football field there, and preserve and try to preserve as much parking, all the parking that you know, we had in the schematic design. But we don't have solutions here. We're looking at options right now. We'll get them to you as soon as we can, with a list of pros and cons and a quick look at the cost implications of them, if anything. As Kevin says, we're going to live within a fixed budget for this whole project. So one way or another, we're going to make it happen. But we just wanted to sort of give you a heads up that that's something that is coming. If you are interested, you know, we'll get you information in advance of our next meeting, so we can make a good collective decision on how things get tweaked a little bit. So it doesn't affect the building at all right now. We're just talking about the alignment of the site planning, the parking lots and fields up by Webster Street.
Yeah, but when you're talking about elevations, you're talking about more money for materials too.
Exactly. That's why we're trying to be as strategic as possible, Bob. It would be sort of not impossible, but it would blow the budget to say we're going to raise the entire site to allow for these fields to happen under the current fields layout. If they have to come up, you know, 4 or 5 feet or something, that's a lot of cubic yards of fill. And it affects the whole site. So we're trying to be smart about it and locate those in a discrete area and separate out the rest of the site, so we can keep it as economical and, you know, low as possible.
That's why, Kyle, I was looking at the topos earlier when I asked for those plans before, and that's why I thought the topos were more reasonable. That's why I was asking for the football field and track to be put over to the right side of the school, heading in that direction, you know, like the corner of it, near the driveway coming in and heading back that way to the elevations, and then the smaller fields out front, which we really wouldn't need that much for material.
Yeah, we're still, when you look close at our plan, we have very little like leftover area. We're being very economical in the use of the real estate we have. Everything's getting used for the most part. There's very little quote unquote leftover space compared to what's cleared today. In other words, where the building's going, where the parking's going, all that land is already cleared. It's already developed. We're not cutting down any more trees. We're not getting any closer to the wetlands. So we're really just sort of rearranging pieces, and each of those fields, unfortunately, you know, an athletic field has to be flat, obviously, or with a slight crown, but we can't slope it. So anything that would be located up front there would be affected by it.
But that's why I was just curious about those
Yeah.
topos on the right-hand side and how the.
No,
perk
you're right to be
on the
concerned.
right-hand
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we can offer tonight. I know we like to come with solutions, not issues, but we just wanted to give you a heads up there on this one.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
Thanks, Carl. I think that's it.
That it, Kev?
Yeah, are there any general questions, process or otherwise? Obviously, you all should have my cell phone number and email. You can reach out anytime. And as Carl indicated, we're gonna, be pulling together information next couple of days and sharing updates. And if it requires, working group or additional SBC meetings, that's what we'll be doing.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Kevin or Carl or anyone else?
Oh,
No?
Good.
Okay, just as a neighbor, I just want to tell you the high water table doesn't surprise me at all.
okay.
I think everybody in this area of North Hanover has sump pumps and has occasional water problems. So I've been waiting for that shoe to drop, so to speak. So anyways, with no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Okay. I'll call the roll. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey.
Yes,
Keith Boyle.
not on the call.
Okay. George Cooney. Jim Coughlin.
Yes.
Bob Mahoney.
Yes.
Bob Mello.
Yes.
Sandy Baldner.
Yes.
Frank Moeller never came on, right? Tom Petrozelli. Dustin Reardon.
Yes.
Joe Zambello.
yes.
Jack Manning.
Yes.
And Jim Harding.
Yes.
All right. Motion carries. We are now adjourned. Thank you.